Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time you are tuning in. Welcome to Homesteading and Gardening in the Suburbs. I'm Emma from Misfit Gardening, and today we're talking about seed banks and what you need to be considering this year when you're buying your seeds. So, without further ado, let's dig in. So, way back in episode 5, I did a whole piece about what a seed bank is and why you need one. Well, today I want to talk a little bit about how to improve your seed bank and some things that we want to make sure that we include, especially since, ability to get seeds has been somewhat difficult this year in 2020. And we want to be able to have a robust seed bank that, we ourselves can go back to and rely on to be able to grow our gardens. Of course, growing our gardens means growing our own food and that we're able to support ourselves and our families and even our local communities. So as a gardener or a homesteader, even, if you're like us and you're in the suburbs, it's really important for you to save seeds from edible plants which grow well in your garden. Not only so that you can be the guardian or the custodian of those strains for the future, and have a story to share of the heirloom seeds that your family's been saving for generations, but also to really save seeds that are adapted to your local growing environment, because ultimately you want to be saving seeds that thrive in your area. These are going to be the plants that do well year after year and become rock stars for your garden. And you want to be saving those because they're things that grow well. And you want to have a mixture of things that grow well, new seeds in your seed bank, as well as seeds from different places. Now let's talk a little bit about seeds that grow well, okay? Because what might grow well for me might grow well for somebody in a different climate, or it might not. So I grow seeds for things that I love, like different flavors, different types of plants, things that my family regularly eats all the time. I also grow things that grow well, whether the family really love to eat them or whether it is just me, like kale, for example, right? My family really don't like eating kale, but kale grows incredibly well in my garden. And I really like kale. The dog also really likes to eat kale, but it's one of the things that we grow a lot of, and it's something that I've saved a lot of seed from over the last couple of years. And the reason for it being is it produces so well, and it's very high in vitamins and minerals, and it's a really good crop to have in a seed bank, especially when you're looking at growing food to really thrive and get away from the grocery store. You want to be growing plants that provide a lot of vitamins and minerals. You want to be growing things that provide starches, calorie foods, as well as those vitamin and mineral foods as well. And some of the things that we like to look for in plants that are going to be going into our seed bank are things like flavor. Is it something that we really truly like to eat? Purple Cherokee tomatoes is one that comes to mind very quickly. Like, that is our absolute favorite tomato to grow. It is super, super delicious. It's not a heavy producer, so we would also grow another type of tomato that grows well and produces a good harvest. So, for example, that would be Amish paste tomatoes. For us, we get these massive, couple of pound worth of tomatoes, per tomato off some of the plants that we have. I don't even remember where I got the original seed from for these Amish tomatoes that I grow, but I grow them year after year, and I've saved seed from these over the last couple of years because there's such a big tomato that grows. So if it's quantity that we're looking for in terms of like how many or how much of a yield or a harvest we'll get, that also needs to be factored in, as well as, how much we like the taste of something. And you should consider that too when you're building your own seed bank. And this is where that garden journal that we talked about in a couple of episodes ago, that's where this comes in super handy, being able to go back through and look at what was growing really well in your garden and what was producing really well, as well as things that are on your wish list of, you know what, I absolutely love this. Every time I grow this, I want to make sure that we're growing this all the time. Now, if you haven't already started writing a list of these plants, then I would start writing these things down so you know what to go shopping for when the seed catalogues start arriving through the door. I know I've received 3 or 4 of them already this year, which is crazy. I can't believe that we're almost in December already. As you're making your list, it's worth noting whether the variety is a hybrid, an heirloom, or an open pollinated variety. Remember, hybrids are not GMO or genetically modified seeds. They are often under utility patents. They're not necessarily a bad seed to have, but they are plants that you can only grow with that particular seed. So if you were to save the seed and try and grow it again, like you could with an open pollinated or an heirloom variety, you would not get the same plants. You would get different variation that happens within naturally within the seed. So, you might get, plants that produce fruits that look very different from the parent plant that you saved the seed from. You might get things that are straggly. You might get things that look totally different. Squashes are an easy way to see this kind of happen with hybrid seeds. But I mean, some people do save hybrid seeds, and I used to. When I originally wrote the article about starting a seed bank, I did. I had hybrid seeds as well as heirloom and open pollinated ones in my garden. And the reason for having hybrid plants was that they produced very reliably. They often have, bigger yields, or they have things like resistance to certain diseases like blight or mosaic virus, and, all of these things that often wreak havoc in our garden or on small farms. So that was my reasoning behind saving some of the F1 hybrids. And I've, read a bunch of stuff about kind of plant breeding over the last couple of years, and people take, often some of the hybrid plants that produce well and kind of add that into the genetics of what they're trying to create when they're trying to breed their own vegetable varieties, which is a very fascinating subject in itself. But in my actual seed bank, of all the plants that I love and adore and I want to keep safe. So I have like 2 seed banks, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I no longer have hybrids in there. I only have heirloom and open pollinated seeds, as well as seeds that I've saved from the garden, as well as purchasing through various retailers. So if you are looking at starting your own seed bank, then definitely get some open pollinated and heirloom seeds in there. Heirloom seeds are old historical varieties, and they're pollinated with the same variety to keep that seed true to type. So for example, winter Hubbard squashes are pollinated with another winter Hubbard squash, so they'll only produce winter Hubbard squashes. Growers producing these seeds go to huge lengths to protect the plants that they're growing from cross-pollinating with other varieties which will pollinate the plant. So you want to make sure that you're getting good seed from a reputable retailer for your heirloom seed, or connect with some people at a seed exchange. That's a great place to swap seeds and try different historical varieties. So I kind of mentioned about getting seed from reputable sources. And this kind of relates to one of the things that I said earlier, right? Having the right kind of seeds in your seed bank, getting them from different places, and then we'll talk a little bit about having a backup. But I mean, certainly this year has been crazy, right? 2020, totally different way of operating than, what we have in the past. And getting our seeds has been somewhat of a challenge. And I know many of you at the beginning of the year were, fought with, websites being down, seeds being, flying off the shelves, literally, in places that you didn't think, there would be flying off the shelves. There was, limits on how many seeds you could buy, timing limits I saw on various websites, when they were open for orders, and, you had to hope quick that you were very quickly adding things to cart, and hitting that button to check out before somebody else ahead of you did. And one of the things that many people were learning during this time was to be pretty savvy when it comes to seed buying. That was getting the right type of seeds that were going to grow in the area that they had, but also getting seeds that they were going to grow and they were going to like, as well as kind of having that list up front and knowing what you were shopping for, because a lot of the times, by the time you hit checkout, there was, no seed of that particular variety left. So a lot of people had a good opportunity to try something new this year, because seeds were selling out left, right and centre. So a lot of people got to try varieties that they wouldn't normally have tried if your supplier was offering a substitution or you were able to get something in that place. So with that being said, one of the things you can do to bolster your seed bank is to get seeds from different suppliers. Now, there's obviously kind of, some big players in the game, right, who have been producing seed for a long time. They've got seeds from, heirloom varieties, open pollinated varieties, hybrid varieties. There's lots of those that are available, and you can get them readily in some of your hardware stores, grocery stores, things like that. Or you can look to kind of the next level down, where you've got, some of the bigger suppliers of things like heirloom and open pollinated varieties, which I'm sure that you'll know who I'm talking about if I see that they have a glorious seed catalogue full of delightful pictures of all these wonderful seeds that they have available. And I mean, their seed catalogue could very well be a beautiful display on a coffee table every year, and I'm sure that you know who I'm talking about. They've got great seeds, but also there's lots of much smaller seed companies available. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you will have heard from at least two of those, and that was Julie at Giving Ground Seeds and Dale at Delectation of Tomatoes. And there are so many more available. And, if you do a quick kind of internet search, I'm sure you'll find a number of them. And for those of you that are in the Grow Your Own Food Academy, there is a massive list in the resources section of the seed companies that I know of that I've been able to find. And there's also a submission form in there for, the seed companies that you know of and that you love, so we can keep adding to it. So if you're in the Grow Your Own Food Academy, check that out. But if not, then I'm afraid you're going to have to do a little bit of legwork trying to find some of the seed companies that are close to you. Because if you're getting seeds that are grown in similar climatic conditions to what you are in, you're going to have a better chance of your seeds growing well and adapting to your garden, which is great. But having seeds from smaller suppliers is also really good for a different reason, because you're actually going to be able to increase that genetic diversity that you have in your seeds by getting them from different suppliers. Because you're going to be able to get seeds that have been grown differently, they've been grown by different people, and those stresses from the environment that these plants have been able to cope with, they're going to be passing that genetic information on to, the next generation to come. So it's a good idea to have, backup from different companies and to encourage diversity in that growing, especially especially when it comes to saving seeds. It's also a really good idea to have a backup in case of germination failure. And this happens, relatively often with seeds. Sometimes, heirlooms are pretty temperamental. They do need a little bit more nurturing than some other types of seeds that are out there. And because of that, sometimes, all the things that you have sown don't always make it. Sometimes they don't make it as seedlings. Sometimes they don't make it after they've been transplanted into the garden, and sometimes they don't make it even when they are fully grown. Things happen. So having a backup of different seed suppliers and sources is going to help you overcome some of those hurdles that might happen. So let's talk about backups, right? There's a saying in the UK, or maybe it's just one that was local to where I grew up, but the saying was, we're not at home to Mr. Cock-Up. And to make sure that we don't hear him knocking, we want to have a backup, basically. And, one of the things that we can do, aside from getting the seeds that we really like from different suppliers, we can also have a separate seed bank and kind of store them in a different area. And believe it or not, that's actually what some of the big seed banks, there's like over 1,000 seed banks actually globally. And what a lot of these seed banks do is they actually send a portion of their seeds to a secondary seed bank to have a backup. So if something goes wrong with the storage of those seeds and they're no longer viable, which means that they're not able to grow anymore, they can contact the seed bank that they had them stored at and have them send their seeds back so they can grow out and start saving them again. Now, obviously, the big old seed bank at Salvbard's probably the most famous, the Doomsday Seed Vault, as it's also known as, but there are smaller seed banks across the globe, and like I said, people share seeds readily across these seed banks so that there is a backup. And you can do something similar. You don't necessarily have to send them into a seed bank, although I'm sure that you could, but you could have a backup by having a second seed bank, perhaps stored somewhere different. So seeds like to be in, somewhere cool and dry and away from the light. So somewhere cool, dark and dry. Some people store their seeds in the freezer, but you need to make sure that they are very, very dry and well sealed before you can do that, because any moisture that gets in there is going to ruin those seeds. Other people store them somewhere in the basement or in a cupboard somewhere that is cool and dry. My grandparents always kept their seeds in the garage or in the garage outside. Other gardeners that I know on the allotment, they kept theirs in their garden shed in the UK. So it really depends on what you have available and where you have available. But I definitely think that having a backup of your seeds is such a great idea. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. You could make a small seed bank and send to a friend, and you can send them to a friend who is going to grow those seeds and who's going to cherish those varieties, and you can help them learn how to save those seeds too, because sharing and educating other gardeners is, a great way to encourage, gardening and growing your own food, but also it's, encouraging people to, grow healthy and nutritious food as well, which I always think is a great thing. But, I love sharing seeds with friends, across the US. That's always really fun, is kind of seeing the pictures of things growing afterwards. Oh my gosh, I've got a friend out in Texas, and we were Marco Poloing a couple of days ago, and she was showing me how well some of the seeds that I'd sent her were growing, and I was really excited for her because she's able to grow so much more in her mild winters than I am here in Utah. And I mean, it was just delightful to see. So if you're listening, I was really excited to see those growing, and they were growing so well for you. But another way that you could do it is to make a seed bank and ask a family member to store it. So you could give them instructions on, where this, should be stored. Some people have got very accommodating family members for their seed habits, and, are able to store things in the freezer or in their basement or wherever. And the great thing about that is, there's a backup somewhere, right? I've read stories about people who have had, backup seed banks that they've buried in different places, in like caches around their property, or not in the property. It's kind of crazy. I mean, if you want to go to that length, that you do you. That's a little bit much for me. So what we actually have is we have seeds that are stored in a freezer. And we also have seeds that are not stored in the freezer. They're just kind of in a big plastic tote, in the paper seed envelopes, or in, just plain old, letter envelopes, and some plastic bags for things that I've stored out of the garden. I also have seeds that I've been saving out of the garden in glass jars. So I started saving various glass jars from sauces or condiments, things like that, that we'd bought from the grocery store, not to can in because, sometimes the glass is super fragile. Things like mayonnaise jars and stuff do not hold up very well. But if it was glass and had a good lid on it, that wasn't tarnished or anything like that on the inside, then I would run it through the dishwasher, let it dry out, and when my seeds that I'd saved were dry, I would put them in these glass jars. Sometimes I would put in like a desiccant pouch to kind of dry things out a little bit more, and then after a couple of weeks I would take that desiccant pouch and seal that jar, and they're just sitting on our canning shelves downstairs in the basement. So there's somewhere that's dark, cool and dry, but I have kind of backups of plants that I grow a lot of. So I grow a lot of beans, so I have a lot of bean seeds. I have bean seeds that I have saved from the garden. I've got bean seeds from different suppliers. I've got bean seeds that I've picked up through the exchange on Seed Savers Exchange, through other seed savers. Things that I keep growing a lot of, like I like to have, a plentiful supply of, just in case, there's a problem, or things don't germinate, or I use all of my seeds and the slugs and snails have eaten them all. True story. So I learned to have kind of backups of things that I really like, and I actually save a big portion of seeds from our garden now. I always allow a couple of plants to run to seed. Sometimes it's just because I like to see the bees and the other pollinators on the flowers, but more often than not, it's so I can actually, make use and save those seeds. And I don't do it just with fruits and vegetables either. I do it with flowers and things as well. So I grew a beautiful heirloom variety of marigolds this year that were from Mexico, and they were the Day of the Dead variety of marigolds, and they were beautiful. They were tall, they were kind of heavily scented. The bees absolutely loved them, but when I got the seeds from a supplier, they said that the germination rate was super low on them, so they'd over kind of filled the package anyway because it was such a low germination rate. It was poor germination, but they grew so well that I wanted to save the seed and share them with many of my gardening friends. friends because they were beautiful and they brought in so many pollinators to the garden as well. And you can include some of those things in your seed bank as well, and it's a good idea too. We want to include things like herbs, vegetables, fruits, and even flowers, because we want to encourage those pollinators into the garden to help our gardens grow better. So, to summarize, we want to make sure that we're growing and including different types of seeds in our seed bank. We want to include from different suppliers, things that have grown in different climates, as well as ones close to home, ones that have been growing in our local kind of regions are going to perform much better in your garden. Try saving seeds from your own garden next year and see about planning, leaving a couple of plants to go to seed. One of the old tricks from the Depression was to leave a vegetable or a plant at the end of the row. So at each end of your rows that you were growing, you would let that one plant run to seed so you could save the seed for the next year. And of course, we want to grow different types of seeds and different suppliers, because we're going to get a greater probability of being able to grow the plants. To give a greater probability of getting a harvest, we want to make sure that we're increasing the diversity in the growing area and have a backup in case of germination failure, and make sure that you're growing plants that are not only going to provide calories, so things like corn is a good calorie crop, as are potatoes or sweet potatoes, but also grow things that produce vitamins and minerals, as well as plants that you absolutely love, right? There's no point in growing 20 Brussels sprout plants if you don't like them. Maybe some other members of your family do, but my family are not big on veggies, and I love the veggies, so, I try to always grow things that I like and things that I know that I can sneak into their food that they will eat eventually. And on that note, I hope that your garden grows beautifully, and I would love to hear from you and what is going to be going into your seed bank, and some tips that you've found having to shop for seeds in 2020. So come on over to the Facebook group. Make sure that you fill out all of the questions that are on there so my team know to let you in. And let me know what's going on in your seed bank and what your favourite tips are. Until then, I hope your garden grows beautifully, and I'll see you guys next week.